The research we will be discussing is Caruso and others' 2009 study titled Political Partisanship Influences Perception of Biracial Candidates' Skin Tone. The present research comprises 3 studies which investigate various components of the researcher's interest. Internal bias impacts our decision-making all the time. One arena that bias may occur is during elections, when we place votes for certain candidates. Various biases have a number of underlying factors, one of which may be skin tone of the political candidates. Non-conscious associations with skin tones have been observed in previous research, whereby white skin color is associated with good and black color is associated with bad. It is believed that the in-group bias pertaining to political partisanship may impact voting habits in conjunction with those findings. The researchers' interests and hypotheses in the studies we will be discussing are based on those assumptions. The focus of this research is how political candidates' skin color influences voting patterns. More specifically, researchers want to know how political partisanship impacts views on skin color of political candidates and if that influences voting behaviors. Caruso and others predict that an in-group situation, whereby voters and politicians share similar political standpoints, will lead participants to believe political candidates are better represented by light skin tones compared to out-group situations. In other words, if participants are told that a politician holds similar political beliefs as them, they will be more likely to think that a lighter-skinned photo is representative of that politician than a dark-skinned photo. The purpose of the first study is to investigate the relationship between in-group and out-group situations in perception of skin tone representativeness. It was hypothesized that when people believe they share views with the candidate, they are more likely to say that light skin tone is representative of that candidate than dark skin tone. In this case, shared views would be correlated with light skin tone. Tying this back to previous research, in-group situations would be associated with good and thus correlated with light skin tone. Study 1 was comprised of 108 participants from Chicago who participated in an online survey in exchange for entry into a $50 raffle. This study has 5 major components. First, researchers measured the political views of candidates. Second, participants viewed a photo and description of a political candidate, then they were assigned to one of 2 conditions. In one condition, participants believed that they predominantly shared political views with the politician. In the second condition, they were made to believe that they did not share political standpoints. Afterward, participants viewed 3 photos of the candidate, 1 unaltered, 1 lightened, and 1 darkened. Then they rated how well each represented the candidate on a scale ranging from 1 to 7, 1 being not at all and 7 being a great deal. From this data, they calculated a light advantage score, which represents the relationship between likelihood to vote for candidates and the skin color that they rated as most representative of the candidates. After analysis, researchers found several findings. First, representativeness ratings varied as a function of whether they believed the politician agreed with their political views. Participants were 2 times as likely to rate lightened photographs as being representative of politicians if they shared similar views. Another finding is that in-group conditions were correlated with light skin representativeness ratings. The second study investigates whether the effects of political partisanship on skin tone would occur when experiencing a well-known candidate. Accordingly, President Obama's photos were used in the study. Researchers hypothesized that even when politicians are well known, sharing political views will result in lighter skin representativeness ratings. Participants included 121 undergraduate students from Arizona State University who completed an online study in exchange for course credit. Study 2 has 4 major components. First, participants were shown 3 images of 2 presidential candidates, Barack Obama and John McCain. Each set of photos contained an unaltered, lightened, and darkened photo. Second, participants were asked to rate the representativeness of each photo for each politician. Third, participants' political partisanship was measured. Fourth, participants indicated the likelihood that they would vote for each politician in an election. Researchers also asked participants if they were eligible to vote and their exposure to media. This was in order to get an understanding of whether the candidates were in fact known to the participants rather than novel, as in the first study. Results showed representativeness ratings of Obama varied as a function of participants' political orientation. These results were not significant for McCain. There was also a negative correlation between conservatism and intent to vote for Barack Obama. Researchers found that the more people considered the lighter skin tone as representative of a candidate who shared their own ideologies, the stronger their stated intention of voting for that candidate. The purpose of the last study was to investigate if racial prejudice could be explaining the results found in the previous 2 studies. To do so, they asked if the effects of lightness perception persists even when controlling for racial attitudes. This study was comprised of 53 undergraduate students from Florida State University who participated in an online study in exchange for entry into a $50 raffle. First, they measured political partisanship in the participants. Then, they measured an IAT score in order to measure associations between pleasant words in African American people. For this measure, a higher score indicates a higher association between pleasant words in African Americans. Next, they looked at ATB scores, which measure racial prejudice in participants. A higher ATB score is associated with more prejudice. Afterwards, participants viewed color-ambiguous photographs of 2 politicians, which were the same as in Study 2, and rated the representativeness of each skin tone for those politicians. Following this, participants indicated their political ideology and voting intentions. Finally, shortly after the 2008 presidential election, the participants indicated their actual voting behaviors in that election. Researchers came to several conclusions from this study. First, there were significant correlations between light advantage scores and IAT scores in conservatives. This is a correlation between the association of African Americans in unpleasant words and rating darker photos as most representative of political candidates. Another finding was that neither implicit or explicit prejudice was a significant predictor of intentions to vote for Obama. Light advantage score was higher among liberals than conservatives. Lastly, conservatism was negatively associated with intentions to vote for Obama. Researchers came to several overall conclusions. First, political partisanship influences perceptions of biracial political candidates. Second, voters darken candidates they don't agree with and lighten those who they do. Lastly, perception of skin tone is related to voting behavior. Here is a table from the article which shows the percent of participants as a function of political partisanship who assigned the highest representativeness ratings to a lightened, darkened, unaltered, or none, tied, of the photographs of biracial candidates. We can see in Study 1 that when participants had opposing views with the candidates, they rated them as best represented by darkened photos 26% of the time. This is compared to 11% for lightened photos. Although almost half of the time the photos were tied, researchers removed that data from analysis. One of the mentioned limitations to the present research is the small percentage Future research should aim to determine if there is a causal link between skin tone perception and voting behaviors. Some other findings. There was no relationship between Obama's Light Advantage score and exposure to liberal media outlets such as the New York Times. This confounding variable was a concern for researchers, but they investigated those possibilities. Another finding is that people's perception of skin tone for novel and known candidates are systematically related to their voting intentions and behaviors. This was concluded largely in Study 2, when researchers did not find significant differences between results when using novel and well-known candidates in the studies. Together, these findings indicate that campaign strategies which darken the skin tone of rival candidates may have merit.